All set.
All right, I will convene our regular meeting of the Burlington Planning Commission for February 8th, 2022. Welcome to everybody who's here. Thanks for joining us. First item on the agenda is the agenda. Are there any changes?
None from staff.
Okay. Any commissioners have any changes? All right, then our agenda is as presented. Item 2 is a public forum. This is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to the commission. Megan, do we have any people to speak?
Yes, we do. We have a number of folks that are here with us tonight. We do have some representatives from UVM who will be presenting to us here in just a moment. We'll add them as panelists when we get to that agenda item. So Richard, Kate, I do see that your hand is up and you're welcome to leave it up if you would like to speak during the public forum. Otherwise, we'll get to you in just a moment. A couple of people reached out before the meeting that we'll have talk first. And if anybody else would like to speak, feel free to use the raise hand button and we'll recognize you. So Sharon Busher, you will be first and you should be all set.
Hey, Sharon.
Hi, good evening. So I'm here to speak about the Trinity Campus item on your agenda. And I wanted to make some preliminary comments, but I'm here really to listen. I wanted to state that firsthand that I support adding housing on that campus. I want to be really clear about that. And as I believe the chair of this commission, when he was a city councilor, actually made a statement that development should occur over parking lots before it takes up open space. I believe that was you, Andy Montreux, who made that statement years ago, and it was wisdom then, and it still is. So I'm hoping that what comes forward tonight, because I know UVM has been contemplating adding housing on this campus, is a master plan for the campus. I think that would be, we'd be well served by knowing what that master plan entails, and that it proposes development over existing parking lots, and there are several on that campus. I wanted to state that I did read the little blurb that was in the packet talking about what is existing in the institutional core overlay zone for Trinity Campus versus the main campus. And right now they are restricted to 40% lot coverage, whereas on the main campus it's 60%. And there wasn't a lot of discussion, although there was some discussion about height. I do believe that height could be contemplated, and if done correctly, there could be added height beyond the 35 feet. And I think in some scenarios it can go to 55 feet. So I'm speaking certainly only for myself, but I feel that I think the community could tolerate that. What I do want to do is flash back to a time when I was on the council and I actually chaired a joint meeting of the Planning Commission Ordinance Committee and the City Council Ordinance Committee to come forward with an overlay zone that is now in place in Ward 6 for main campus. And it was a long process, but a very thoughtful one, really addressing the need for the university and for the city to allow UVM to add housing, but also to keep adequate buffers to protect neighborhoods that are commingled with the university. So I want to speak in support of keeping adequate buffers. And I don't believe that Colchester Avenue is the kind of buffer I'm talking about. It's a street. I'm talking about what I heard at the city council meeting was some discussion about changing the buffer from 115 feet setback to 15 feet from the sidewalk. And I don't believe for buildings that are this large that dorms, not classrooms, but dorms, that's adequate buffer. I worked really hard with the hospital to get a buffer around the hospital to allow them to develop on top of the hill, but have a transitional zone around to protect the neighborhood so both would thrive. And that's really what I'm really advocating for. The commission to look at this, to allow development, be thoughtful about the surrounding neighborhoods, and come forward with a plan that everybody thrives and we get the housing we need, and the community feels it embraces what happens and doesn't feel threatened by it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sharon.
Okay, the next person is Susan Butani or Bob Butani.
Hello, welcome.
Hi, this is Bob Itani. I just want to say on behalf of my wife and myself that we're happy to participate and observe this meeting, and we're interested very much so in learning about UVM's plans for additional housing on the Trinity campus. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Okay, those are the only hands that I see to speak during the public forum. We do have, again, a number of members here, including some members of the media, and that is the only group of folks that I am seeing who want to speak.
Okay, good. Thank you. So we'll close out the public forum. Item 3 is the chair's report. I don't have anything to report, so we'll go to item 4, which is the director's report. Megan?
Just one quick update for you. Last night, the city council held a public hearing on the short-term rental amendments that you've been working on. We talked about this briefly at your last meeting in terms of what has changed since it was voted out of your joint committee process. The city council ultimately voted to delay taking action on the changes. They held the public hearing, and we're hopeful that they're going to actually discuss the ordinance itself at their meeting on the 22nd. So we'll keep you posted.
Megan, was there anything at the public hearing that was of interest?
A number of the short-term rental hosts that you all heard from very regularly during your work were there speaking about the changes. I would say that probably many of the comments were similar to the comments that you heard during your process.
Great, thank you.
And that's all. Well, I guess I will just share really quickly. You all got the agenda for this week's meeting from Bridget O'Keefe. Bridget is a really excellent member of the CEDO team who's going to just be helping us out with some of the planning commission work for the next few months. So be on the lookout for those agendas to come from Bridget. And I will try to remember in the future to continue to send you the calendar invites as well. I know Alex had responded and said that that's actually a really helpful addition for you. So I'll try to keep up with sending those on as well.
I second that from Alex. I live and die by calendar invites.
Yeah, my apologies. I normally attach the agenda to the calendar and send it out to you, but because we split up the responsibilities this time, I just overlooked sending it to you. So we'll get back on that.
Good. Thank you. So
You're
on to item 5, which is University of Vermont Trinity Campus plans.
All
And
right.
we have people to speak to this.
You do. I am going to add a number of folks here from the University of Vermont, and I will turn over the floor to them as they're coming on and turning on their cameras. I'll just go ahead and say that as we talked about in the memo that was in your agenda packet, the idea of exploring the zoning for the Trinity Campus portion of the UVM campus is one of the items that was introduced in the mayor's 10-point housing plan that was announced back in December. This is an idea that has been talked about a number of times in recent years, both of interest to the city and to the university. We do have Richard Kate here tonight, as well as Lisa Kingsbury, and they will actually share more information about what the university's plans are for the Trinity campus and what their interests are in terms of coming to you with a request to consider some aspects of the institutional zoning district that applies to that campus. So with that, Richard, you should be able to share your screen. And if you would like to give a more full introduction of you and Lisa, I would like to turn over the floor to you.
Great. Well, welcome, Richard and Lisa.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Richard Cate. I'm Vice President for Finance Administration at UVM. I've been there for some time. Lisa is responsible for all of our campus planning activities. Wendy Koenig is also listening in, and she's deals with our university relations activities. I'm going to try to share the screen here and see if that all works the way it should. And Megan can let me know if you're seeing it or not.
We can see your screen, Richard.
Okay, good, thank you. So as Megan said, we were at the Planning Commission back in early January talking about this proposal, and then the end result of that was that we were directed to come back and talk to you about it in more detail. So what I'm providing for you is a bit more detail than what the council saw. So in terms of the things I want to talk about, we'll talk a little bit about the housing goals, UVM's commitment to housing its students on campus. I'll explain some of the zoning restrictions and then give you a little bit more in terms of how we would like to both increase the amount of housing on Trinity Campus, but also enhance what is already there. So in terms of the goals for the campus, we are proposing to build new undergraduate residence halls. They would hold somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 students. We are also proposing to build graduate apartments, and in that case, it would be about 120 individuals. We're also proposing to upgrade our existing residence halls. This is not as much a zoning issue, but just to tell you what we've got in mind. Mercy Hall and Macaulay Hall that were built in 1958, 1962, respectively. They need some work in terms of the replacing windows and portions of the curtain wall on the exterior of the buildings, that sort of thing. We are also proposing to build a larger dining hall on the campus. We have a modest sized one there now, but a lot of the students that are currently on Trinity eat a number of their meals on the main campus. Trying to enhance kind of a little bit more sense of community on the campus. And so there'd be some exterior landscaping changes and the like to try to bring that about. And then obviously the reason I'm here especially is to talk about requesting zoning changes to be able to accomplish all of this. What we have here, everything on the left of the screen is the way things are now, and the right is what we're asking about. Right now we have 40% lot coverage limit in that particular zone. It's about 38% covered now, and we're asking for 60% to be able to move forward with the project. Right now there's a very, very deep buffer zone that's been established on this site. It goes back 115 feet. It's within just a few feet of the existing buildings. I imagine you are generally have a general knowledge of what the campus looks like, but there's a large green space between the street and the buildings that exist right now. What we're asking for is a 25-foot setback instead of the 115. But in the next leg of this, I want to talk a little bit about how we're proposing to stage this. The current height limit on the property is 55 feet. What we're suggesting here is to have a height limit within the existing buffer zone, that 115 feet, that of no more than 45 feet. And I'm going to show you pictures that show you that that isn't all that much higher than some of the frame houses on the other side of the street. There's the land on which we're proposing to build, and this would be for the graduate housing, and I'll show you more in a minute. There is a drop off from the sidewalk. It drops down 12 to 15 feet. So before we ever start to build, we're already almost 15 feet below the street level. So when we go up, it doesn't have as much impact. We are asking for an 80-foot height limit back beyond the 150-foot buffer so that we can build the undergraduate housing and be able to build enough units to make it economically feasible. A little bit about the site plan. What exists is in the lighter gray, and then the dark gray is what we're proposing to build. The outline closest to the street that looks kind of like a Lego block there is the graduate housing, the 120 beds. That's the building we're proposing to have at the 45-foot maximum. Behind it is and the rest of the dark gray is the undergraduate housing. These are the buildings we're proposing to have a maximum of 80 feet. Again, we would hope to have at least 400 beds in that structure. This is what things look like in profile. So if you start on the far left, that's an existing residence on the other side of Colchester Avenue. And then you can see the rooftop there of the building that we're proposing is 45 feet up above the street, and we are that's the maximum. We're not suggesting necessarily go quite that far, but it'd be in that ballpark. But and because the land does drop off, and I'm suggesting a 45-foot height limit, and as I understand it, from the current regulations, that's calculated by kind of averaging the elevation of the ground along the line of the building. So you can see where that would be. As you drop back, you can see the buildings where we're proposing to have them be up to 80 feet. The flat gray blocks are the existing structures. So we tried to give you a little bit more perspective on what this would look like. This is a Google Earth picture of the campus as it is now, and in this area, hopefully you can see my cursor moving around. You can see the kind of the block diagram with the windows for the graduate housing, what we're proposing that would look like at that level. Give you a perspective of it from the sidewalk. Lastly, I took this picture from the street to try to give a perspective again of the existing private dwelling on the other side of the street, and how the new structure would look as it aligned with them in terms of elevation. You saw what it looks like on the profile, but this is what it looks like kind of in real life. So that's, I don't need to talk a lot more. I'm open to your questions, but this is generally what our request is and what we try to give you an idea of what it might look like.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the commission? Don't see any. I'm not seeing everybody's picture, so if you want to speak up, just speak up.
Richard, would you mind taking down your screen share just for a second?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes.
That's okay.
There we go.
Ah, now I could see everyone again. Any questions for Richard?
I have a
Alex.
question. Hi, Richard. Thanks for the presentation. I'm just wondering about like the housing and enrollment, because I'm sure that people are going to be concerned about the 25-foot limit from Colchester Avenue. My question is, I imagine that you're going to have a lot of people saying, why don't you house more people on Trinity Campus? And I'm just wondering about the undergraduates, like the requirement for the University of Vermont is that freshmen and sophomores live on campus. And
That's correct, yes.
Juniors and seniors can live where they choose, right? So who would be housed in that undergraduate portion?
It would be primarily sophomores, probably some juniors.
Right.
We try to maximize the number of freshmen in the central campus.
And I'm wondering if, there's any thought to like replacing the back, is it the back 5? Those housing units? And putting...
I think that day will come. It's, if you think about this in kind of a sense of phasing, I think that we are going to need to do that at some point. But in this instance, we wanted to get this phase of things started first.
Okay.
So I'll just ask.
I might add that we're trying to understand what our limitations are going to be in toto. So we're trying, to some degree, I'm trying to show you what will likely be, I understand, probably the most controversial part of this endeavor. And so that we need to know what we're going to be able to do in toto, and then we can think about the future.
Alex, do you have more?
I have just one more question, which is there parking associated with these structures?
Yes. So we are, as Sharon was saying earlier, we are proposing to cover up a number of parking lots in this endeavor. And we expect that for the new buildings, we would have the parking probably on the other side of the street over in the Centennial Lot or something like that. We currently lease a number of spaces to the hospital and other entities there. And so, and the other thing that's happening is we have far fewer people parking on campus on any given day at this point, because a number of our folks have gone to almost permanently telecommuting. And so Lisa and I have talked about the JITMA and this sort of thing. But as I said, we're leasing a number of spaces. And so if we were going forward with this, we'd probably reclaim them and use it for student parking.
Thank you.
Good. Richard, just following up on what you were saying and Alex's questions a little bit. I know housing at UVM is always a perennial issue, making sure there's enough and continuing to expand that. Are there more opportunities? It sounds like there are. Are there more opportunities on the campus, Trinity Campus, for housing beyond what you're just looking at now?
Yeah,
and what do you see?
I believe there are. Again, subject to what we can do in regard to the zoning and the lot coverage and the height and that sort of thing. But we have, in a very preliminary sense, not something that we are proposing right now, plotted a fairly large building on the site of the back 5, as Alex was saying, and where we would significantly gain additional beds.
Good. Anyone else? Michael.
Just wondering, so are these would be, I understand that you're moving sophomores over to this campus. Are the beds are additive though? Just so I want to make sure I understand that.
Yes, the beds are additive.
Okay. And then also, I think we've already said it, but just so my understanding is you sort of arrived at this point because you, in terms of what you're asking for, because you felt like with the setback from Colchester Ave, this is just the tension point, but doesn't necessarily reflect sort of the entirety of what you'd like to do on Trinity. I just want to make sure I understood that.
It will change and limit. We've got to build some graduate housing, and we've got to. So if we can't build it there and we have to set it back, then we'll be displacing a lot of space that we would otherwise use for undergraduate and that sort of thing. So we're just trying to maximize the use of it in a manner that is not overly intrusive. That's our goal. We're trying to find the balance. We're trying to maximize the use of that campus, but still, as you can see in this picture, ensure that there's a lot of green space and it looks, it fits in with the neighborhood.
And with the height limit that you've proposed, outside of 115 feet, would that accommodate your plans for the other developments as well?
Yes, it would, yes.
Richard, one detail about the request that I was just hoping you could speak to. In the elevation drawing you showed, it looked like there is an existing dorm that is already at around 80 feet in height. Is that correct?
I think
Maybe if you could share your slides again. I just wanted to clarify one of those.
what you were seeing was Macaulay Hall, and Lisa, if I stammer here, you jump in. So what you're seeing, you're talking about the one in the back
Yes.
in terms of nursing.
Yeah,
Is
that's
that where your cursor is right now? Is that an existing building?
it's not.
No,
Okay.
that block is not. That there is an existing building that you would normally see there, but that block is going higher than what that would be.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
that would be to the east of Mercy Hall.
Okay. Thank you. I was just confused by the color scheme there,
Yeah.
because I didn't think that there were buildings that tall on campus, on that campus
No,
already.
there are not. No.
Okay.
I'm sorry, that is confusing. We were, as you know, running right up the mark to get everything done, and
Sure. Yep. Thank you for clarifying. I think I just wanted to double check that point because one of the things that the commission is probably aware of about the current zoning is that the height limits for the Trinity Campus overlay zoning district are 35 feet or the height of the tallest existing structure, but no more than 55 feet in height. And so I just wanted to clarify what was the tallest structure we were looking at and whether it was already over 55 feet or not.
yeah, no, we don't have anything that big.
So I believe Man Hall is about 55 feet. Man Hall is, I believe, the tallest on Trinity Campus.
Anyone else?
It's the tallest, and it's on much higher ground than Mercy and Macaulay are as well.
So one way or another, what would your time frame be for getting information or decision out of the Planning Commission, which ultimately, if we move forward to approve or do anything with zoning changes, has to go to the council as well?
Of course. Well, obviously, I understand the need for public hearings and deliberation and all those things. So we're not suggesting we have to have this tomorrow, but we would like to move forward. It'd be nice to know what the timetable would be, such that in a perfect world, we'd know within, I don't know, a couple to maximum maybe 3 months of what was going to happen here, because we're limited in what we can do in terms of design or anything else. And what I'd really like to do is get people working on construction drawings for these buildings. And, I need to be able to go back to the Board of Trustees and say, we're able to do X because of the zoning. And they have a meeting in May. I certainly would like to be able to go to that meeting and say, the city says we can do this. And then, and then if we needed to redesign or do anything different than what you're looking at, we would have had time to have done it before we got to that May meeting.
Okay. So Megan, what would, and I want to check in with the commission also to see if this is something that folks want to take up. And it sounds like we would be taking it up relatively soon, something that's consistent with the agenda, Megan, that you gave us at our last meeting or so. But what would our process be on this one, assuming that we do take it up?
Yes, so a couple of additional items for the Planning Commission as an FYI in terms of talking about this proposed change. The university representatives, some of the university representatives that are here tonight, myself and Brian Pine from CEDO will all be talking to the wards 1 and 8 NPA tomorrow night about some of the university's housing plans. And I would imagine that a discussion of the Trinity campus would be part of that. I think if the commission is interested in moving forward with the request that you received, we would likely bring this back to one of your meetings in March to continue to discuss what the actual changes to a zoning amendment might look like. There are a couple of additional items that staff has identified that we may want to look into as part of changing the zoning for Trinity campus if we move in that direction. So at this point, we're looking for your direction on, what do you think of the proposals that Richard shared with you tonight in terms of the 3 key areas of zoning that they are requesting to be changed? And then I think the other piece of this is that we want to have some additional time for some community engagement around this concept, to get some feedback from the neighborhood as well, as part of the Planning Commission's work to consider a zoning amendment.
Great. So let me bring this back to the commission then. I think this is certainly the concept. I don't know if the details of it are, but the concept of rezoning Trinity campus is something we've certainly talked about for a while. Is this something the commission is wanting to take on at this point, to start looking at this, Alex?
In a word, yes.
Okay,
I do have a question. I have a question for Richard and Lisa, but I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you, Amy.
Sure, go ahead.
About building new residence halls, it's my understanding that if you ask the students themselves where they'd prefer to live, it would be somewhere between campus and downtown. Is there any thought to building a residence hall on the parking lots on the UHC campus? Behind the administration building? Those are just big empty lots of asphalt.
I have the preliminary drawings right here. We have looked at that. We don't believe that's where we should start in this instance, because we want to try to build up this campus environment, but it certainly is a very real possibility. Part of that will depend on in terms of the hospital's plans. There's been some discussion about the timing of when they might depart that building and that sort of thing, and the need for the parking and all that. But if we could find a way to do something on that site without having to build some sort of major parking structure to make up for the coverage, it is something that I think at some point we probably want to have a conversation about. We're not there right yet, but it is certainly something that I thought about.
That's helpful. I appreciate that. And just, we all need parking, but anything you do is better than, more productive than acres of asphalt.
Right.
If I could just add just a couple quick things to that. You're correct that in our studies with the students, the undergraduate students have expressed, and that's upper class undergraduate students, have expressed a desire to be between downtown and campus. Graduate students actually have vocalized that Trinity campus is a place where they would like to be. And I think some of the things Richard talked about in terms of, adding more students to Trinity campus, then also adding a dining facility, will hopefully enliven that campus and make it a more desirable place than it is right now.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Emily? And then Michael after.
I just wanted to say that I think this is a great thing to be taking on as a commission. We've been talking about student housing forever and wanting UVM to build more housing on or close to campus. So let's talk about this as soon as we can.
Michael?
Yeah, I wondered, it may be too early. I'm just still interested in the kind of full build out of Trinity with cartoon characters. Do you have an estimate of how many beds that might represent, say, under this proposal? Obviously you've got the 580 right here, but what, any additional development, what that would look like?
So it's at least 520 here, maybe more.
Okay.
It's 400 and 120.
Oh, I see.
And what we were looking at on that back site was something in the vicinity. Right now, at least I think it's something like 220 students back there. And we were thinking if we had the 80-foot height limit, that we might be able to double that on that site in a newer building. The buildings are dated. They really at some point need to go, and they're okay, but they're not what we would want. But we could create a much more efficient building out there. So within the 80, I think we thought we could get to 450 or something like that.
Okay.
And again,
Oh,
all of this would turn back into a conversation about parking and parking lots and all that in terms of where we could go and what we could do. Yes.
Good.
and then,
Okay.
Andy, I'm very supportive of moving this forward. It seems like a great way to add units.
Yeah, so I think there's pretty broad support on the commission to move forward with this conversation. Megan, if you could bring this, let's plan on bringing this to one of the March agendas, as you were saying. And, as you come up with what, from the planning side of it, what you think could be done. Also just staff recommendations on what their proposals are, and, any suggestions on dealing with those would be appreciated as well.
Sure thing. And we'll make sure to also keep the commission informed about other, questions and thoughts about the proposal to reconsider this zoning from the community as well, from the neighborhood. Like I said, at the NPA meeting and probably in other forums as well. And I know some of you live in the neighborhood near this part of campus. So, if you also are able to share an update on this with your neighbors and friends and help us kind of understand what people's thoughts are about what's proposed here, I think it'll help give you perspectives to consider as you talk about the zoning amendment. So.
Good. Okay. Well, Richard and Lisa, thank you for coming tonight. And I think sounds like we're having a conversation on this going forward, and hope to see you back in that process.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good.
Thank you.
Good
Thank
night
you.
now.
Good night. So we'll move on to item 6, proposed CDO amendment, minimum parking and TDM requirements. Megan or
Right.
Scott, do you
It's
want
our
to
turn.
update us where we are?
Sure. Okay. So following the last meeting, we incorporated a few additional changes into the actual text of the proposed parking amendment, as well as into the draft memo that we had shared with you for your last meeting. In particular, we have added on, sorry, one second. I have too many windows open here and I just clicked on the wrong one. Somehow I just closed the agenda. My apologies while I get it back open again. If you look into the section of the ordinance that talks about exemptions from the maximum parking limits, that was where I was trying to go, which is on page 27 of your agenda packet. We have clarified 2 additional exemptions that were items that the Planning Commission gave us feedback on at the last meeting. One is to make sure that parking spaces that are provided on properties that are the subject to the institutional parking management plan are not subject to either minimum or maximum parking limits. And that was what we understood as the takeaway from your discussion about how you wanted to ensure that the parking management plan process really adequately addresses the needs of the institutions for parking and gives them as much flexibility to address how they're meeting those needs, and didn't want them to be artificially limited from the maximums if that was what they needed to be able to meet their needs on campus. So that's one of the exemptions. The other exemption is that issue that we talked about for existing parking. In particular, existing surface lots is probably what we're talking about. So this came up as the result of a question about What do we do in situations where a change of use might occur, where the new parking maximum would be less than the old parking maximum, and when essentially would we require excess parking to be removed? So this establishes a standard that says, if a property is undergoing complete redevelopment or substantial rehabilitation, which is a threshold that we have in our ordinance, that is when the excess parking would have to come into compliance with the maximum limits. Otherwise, that parking can continue to exist. One additional change that I would like to suggest that we make before we refer this over back up to the City Council Ordinance Committee, I should say, is on page 24 of your packet. It's in the table of maximum parking by use. So I did reach out to the transit planners at GMT to just make sure that the way that this ordinance was addressing operation facilities like GMT's center down on Queen City Park Road would not limit either their employee or their transit vehicle parking needs at an operation center like that. Was able to better understand from them, what does their bus fleet look like? What does their employee fleet look like? And what does their visitor parking need look like? So I think for this one, where we say that registered vehicles are exempt from the limits, I think what we should also do here is say, and this is back to a discussion that we were having before, Andy, about parking per people. For GMT's concerns, they have up to 60 to 70 employees that arrive at the site at the same time to leave in transit vehicles. And they arrive between 4:30 and 6:30 in the morning when a lot of TDM solutions are not available to them. So they felt it was really important to make sure that we had a limit that was high enough to enable them to have their staff park there and arrive for shifts. So I think what we can do here is follow suit like some of the other uses in the ordinance and just say the maximum parking is allowed at 1 per employee plus 1 per the ratio for visitors that's in the ordinance, and then continue to exempt the buses. And with that, Scott and I identified just a few other minor tweaks. We made sure to address, you might remember in the short-term rental discussion, we were condensing a number of the hotel, motel, bed and breakfast type uses into a lodging definition. As these things tend to go, the one place in the ordinance that we didn't touch throughout that entire process was the parking table associated with those changes of use. So we are including the lodging changes here in this table as well. But those are the only changes to the actual text of the ordinance that we've incorporated since your last meeting.
Megan, we talked about whether this should apply in the downtown areas where you have form-based code.
Yes.
Has anything happened with that, or any thoughts on that?
Yes, sorry, Andy. That is incorporated here. So the 5th exemption is for parking for properties within Form District 5 and 6.
Good. Any questions, comments from anybody? Michael?
I thought the minutes did a really good job at articulating our what I thought was a pretty collective understanding of the TDM requirement for the smaller project or smaller units or smaller buildings, I suppose. So I'm not sure what the right answer is to this, but short of taking that language out of the proposed ordinance, how do we prioritize that topic when it goes back to council? It's kind of just an open question for me, because I think we have some agreement here that it's well, basically just as was said in the minutes.
Yes, and I did use the minutes to actually propose some changes to the draft memo that's in the packet as well. So on page 36, I made a few edits to this based on your discussion. The things that were changed are highlighted in yellow. So I think, yeah, Michael, one of the questions I think that you had specifically posed to the rest of the commission was whether you would like to make a more explicit recommendation to the council ordinance committee that they remove those TDM standards at this time. If, you know, or if you just want to convey that these are your concerns about how the TDM would work at that scale. So I do think that that's still an open question for you all in terms of deciding how you want this to be communicated to the council.
If I'm not mistaken, I think what our general consensus was at our last meeting was that we think the TDM portions of the ordinance by and large should be taken out right now and visited in more depth, doing the, you know, the study that Megan and Scott have suggested, and taking a, you know, a larger look at it before coming up with what the details of what the ordinance should be, and whether it should be in an ordinance or be in, you know, be in the zoning code or be in ordinance or some other regulations, just how that should be done. But I think if I'm not mistaken from our discussion last time, the general consensus was, let's understand the issue better through the study they want to do before really moving forward with it. Do I have that right? Is my memory right on that?
Yeah, I do think that that was the consensus. I just wasn't sure if you wanted to specifically say to the council, take it out. So I think that would be helpful. If that is how the commission is feeling, I think that would be helpful. I can make sure that your memo reflects that and elevates that point when you send this back.
Is there anyone who disagrees with either what I just said or what Megan is saying, that just recommending that we take it out completely pending this work?
Yeah, it'll be accompanied by the memo as well. And I apologize, Megan. I somehow missed your memo. It's well done. It totally reflects the conversation we had.
No problem. I contemplated whether it should be before the ordinance or after. So sorry about that.
So it seems like
Before.
I'm not hearing any pushback from either what I said or you said, Megan. So I think the answer is yes. You could be explicit in that.
Okay.
On the 5 different bullets that you have in the memo, are those particular to just the residential projects, or is that for TDM in general?
Those are comments that the commission shared over the course of our discussions about concerns around expanding it to the residential areas, or to projects of a smaller scale, I should say.
Because I think some of the comments, I think, are relevant to any, you know, in general, like the first bullet where the zoning standards only impact new development or significant redevelopment. I mean, I think that cuts across the board, not just the residential. So you may not want to have these just tied to, you know, the small residential developments, but just some general concerns.
Sure, I can clarify that these are, you know, more broad concerns about. I think that most of our discussion has been within the context of expanding them beyond their current applicability. But I think that point, you're right, is one that cuts across all of the areas of applicability, current and proposed. So I'm happy to move that one up a little bit and make sure the rest of them, I think the rest of them are really specific to the scale of additional areas that the TDM would be proposed to be added to.
Okay. I have a question for the commissioners. There is a sentence in the second paragraph of the memo, and I want to see how accurate the sentence is, or at least the beginning part of it. It says, while some commissioners recognize that expanding TDM standards to other parking districts through zoning can be a leverage point to get these requirements in place, the majority of the commission is concerned about codifying standards today that a study might modify later. I think we are, not just the majority are concerned about codifying the standards pending a study, but none of us want to codify the standards before the study happens.
So
Do I have that accurate?
I'm not sure that that's accurate. And
Okay.
Bryn is here, but I don't know if she can chime in. I know she has previously expressed her support for these changes. I don't know that I've heard her speak directly to the TDM piece of this, but I didn't want to misrepresent her perspective on this. So
Okay.
Bryn, are you
got
able
it.
to weigh in at all? She may not be able to add. She might just be listening right now.
Okay.
I think I could use some more clarification. I don't remember what we're talking about with the study.
So when we were working on the minimum parking amendments the first time, when we were talking about transportation demand management standards, one of the things that I know David had done a lot of research on and had expressed to the Joint Committee at that time was that a lot of successful TDM programs are based in some kind of specific, transportation demand management study or a more specific transportation plan. Oftentimes, these are based in some kind of study that says these are our specific goals for either vehicle miles reduced or carbon emissions reduced or some other kind of metric that is part of a planning process. And then a TDM plan kind of flows from that. And there are some specific examples that I've seen that help kind of weigh different transportation demand options that say, will this help us achieve this main goal that we have? And so that is something that was actually part of, gosh, I can't remember if it was a formal part of the Joint Committee's referral of that ordinance out to the City Council, or if it was just something that we kind of discussed as a supplementary recommendation. But we had said, we really need to do this study of what a TDM program is trying to achieve in Burlington and the best ways to do that. We then were able to, through Councillor Hansen's advocacy, we were able to secure some funding in our budget for this year in order for us to actually move forward with doing it. So we just, we have a little bit of a bandwidth problem right now with actually getting that out the door, but it is something that has been budgeted and in theory should be on our short-term horizon to do. So when we talk about that study, that's really what we're talking about. And I think from my perspective, it becomes even more important when we're talking about the scale and context of the city where this proposes to expand TDM, making sure that we consider the right options for those areas.
I guess I don't think that the phrasing, the majority of the commission is concerned about codifying standards that a study might modify later. I guess it could be clear in what I'm hearing you say is that if we did a study, it's going to tell us what our goals are. And then we'll be able to look at what we're doing to see if it actually lines up with our goals.
Or what options we have to achieve those goals, right?
And if it's the best thing to do. And so we don't want to put the horse ahead of the cart and just put in standards that we don't know if they're effective or actually even relate to our goal, because we don't even know what our goal is.
Okay.
So I would say that the study's not going to modify it. So I don't know.
The study's going to drive it.
The study's going to drive it. The study doesn't modify anything. The study gives us information.
Yep.
And maybe the study's we need a study. We need a study to help us figure out what the heck's going on and what we want to accomplish. And then we can put some standards in place to try to do that.
Okay.
And when I read this, one thing, I feel strongly about and want to communicate very clearly is that I think that a small effort is disjointed and that the city needs a robust, comprehensive transportation plan. And that this TDM, asking individual properties to create a TDM is not a comprehensive transportation plan for the city.
So,
But that's my opinion.
So I'm just seeing Bryn's chat comment. She said, I can't speak right now, but I think that the study will only help inform how TDM could best be applied. So thanks, Bryn. It does sound like she's supportive of the study first as well.
Okay.
Any other comments on either the memo or the ordinance itself. Alex?
I don't want to speak for commissioners who may not be here, but might it be better to, when you were communicating to the council, just to say the commission believes rather than some commissioners or the majority, you know?
Yes, and if that's the way that the commission wants this to be worded, I can edit that. Again, I was trying to be respectful because I wasn't sure that you had a full majority of opinions on this. So if that is the feeling of everyone here, I can change this to just say that commission.
Is there anyone here who feels differently than that? And Bryn, if you're able to just send in a chat comment on that as well. Is it okay to just say the commission as opposed to some commissioners?
Okay.
Okay,
She says,
thanks, Bryn.
all right, well then I will make those changes as well.
And thanks, Alex, for suggesting that. Anything else? Megan, do you need anything else from us?
I don't think so. Scott, do you need anything else?
On my button there. Do I need anything else? Boy, I think the
About
short
this.
answer is no. You know, what Emily and others are talking about though makes a whole lot of sense. I'm just not sure how we're going to get there, but I think it's possible in terms of having a comprehensive citywide TDM rather than doing it piecemeal at these various strata.
What do you mean?
Michael?
I just wanted to share something with the group. I shared this with Megan, but St. Paul, I randomly came across, had kind of an interesting approach to this, just to give you a paradigm of what this might look like, where as opposed to having individual property owners or developers, you know, engage transportation engineers, they basically had each development or building had to have a TDM, but it was a points-based system with a citywide ordinance that they subscribed to. So, you know, they had certain objectives that they could meet, and those goals were laid out from the part of the city. So just to like give you a sense of how that all comes together with one goal, that was kind of like an interesting example to me. So
Yeah, and I think
some folks have figured it out, I suppose.
yeah, that's probably part of the question that will be looked at in the study is, you know, how best to put together something together like this. Should it be a citywide? Should it be, you know, property by property? You know, I kind of think it should be a city, you know, city-driven thing that people could work into, but we'll see. Emily?
And I also, on that line of thinking, is it really the planning commission's purview? Like, is this our field to be looking into on regulating the transportation and car usage and of buildings and developments? And do we really want to link those two things together? Because is it moving towards being less about the space and structure of a building that's built and how the land is used, and actually moving more towards maybe the consumer, maybe the person who's driving the car? You know, we're asking developers to create, you know, like to fix this problem that isn't necessarily even linked to them. Like they create a building, but we're linking that transportation to the built structure, to the built environment. And I'm not sure that's where it belongs. And I'm not sure if it's our job to do that.
So that's a really good point. It reminds me, and I think I mentioned this before, that it reminds me a little bit of the discussion that we had a few years ago about particularly development in the downtown, where, you know, we are asking people build housing, build all these different things for us in our downtown. And as soon as somebody came and said, yes, I'll do this, we said, okay, now prove to us we could handle it. Show us that our schools are large enough, that the roads are, you know, can handle it, that we have enough utilities to do it. And we said, wait a minute, this is backwards. We want people to do this stuff. So that's really city's responsibility to make sure the roads are, you know, are good enough, the utilities are good enough to handle that kind of thing. So we stripped a lot of that out of the zoning requirements and said, please build it. And, you know, the analogy here is we want all this stuff to happen. We want the TDM type of things. We want people to be less in their vehicles. And I think you're right. You know, the question really is that something that should be just up, you know, required of the individual developers and property owners, or is that something that we as a city really should be looking at and more on the consumer side of it, as you're saying, as opposed to the developer side. So.
Yeah,
And
and I think that what you're all expressing too, especially on the vehicular side, is also part of why, as part of our discussion about the minimum parking changes the first time, we also talked about the role of impact fees. Right now, our impact fees for transportation have such a narrow bucket of improvements that they can be used for. And as we are just getting ready to embark on a study to look at how our impact fees should be assessed, one of the questions that we have is, are there other ways that we can look at the capacity that's created from new development that uses other systems that can help us to build more robust systems as well? And so, that's just another area of where we're trying to move beyond just thinking about cars as part of development. So,
Emily?
The impact fees is a good one, because I remember that presentation, Megan, I'm sure you were there, about, we put so much emphasis on impact fees, and then there's so much drive, like developers should pay the impact fees, they should be taxed for not putting in parking spaces. And then you see the revenue numbers for impact fees, and it's like, oh, we brought in $30,000 2 years ago because of the impact fee. And at the same time, this is my broken record here. At the same time, we give away hundreds of thousands of dollars of free parking to people all over the city. And then we're just hammering on the impact fees, and we need developers to pay more in impact fees. It's a one-time fee. It doesn't come anywhere close to dealing with the issue. And it's not even connected to the problem.
Megan, has the City Council Ordinance Committee scheduled its next meeting yet?
I actually reached out to the city attorney who schedules their meetings to see if it has been, and I haven't heard. Oh, Kim is here. Sorry, Kim. Hi.
Hi, no problem. No, actually they haven't. I just wanted to make sure actually that you were going to get through this tonight, because the next meeting was going to be to discuss this.
So the question is whether the final drafts of everything should come back to us at our next meeting, or should we be finishing this up tonight and then for the next draft just circulate it, I would suppose, so that we could see it before it goes out. But
if the commission is comfortable, I would recommend that you vote this out tonight. What I can do is, on the final edits for the memo, I can send them to Andy and get his sign off on it before I send it over to Kim for the committee. But yeah, I would recommend going ahead and referring this to them tonight if you're comfortable.
how are folks with that? Okay, then a motion would be in order to do that.
So the motion is to refer this back to the Council Ordinance Committee after the chair reviews edits made by staff. Is that correct?
And it would be, and it would be both the our revised version of the zoning code itself and the memo on the TDM.
Okay.
So that was a motion by Michael, and was that a second, Alex?
It is now.
Okay, seconded by Alex. Any more discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Bryn, I like the way you raised your hand. That was very nice. All right, that passes unanimously. So thank you all. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Megan, for your work on this.
You're welcome.
We're
And
on to item.
I was just going to say thanks to all of you for being willing to put in the time to review this. I know that we started off this conversation, being confused and frustrated about the process, but I really appreciate your attention to detail and your willingness to engage on this. I'm happy to take all of your comments back to the Ordinance Committee.
Good, thank you. So we're on to item 7, which is commissioner items. Our next meeting is Wednesday, not Tuesday, February 23rd And then after that, it's Tuesday, March 8th. Any committee reports or any other commissioner items? Michael?
I had one for Megan. Can you give us an update, or I don't know if this exists anymore, but the neighborhood project in context of the stuff we're talking about with UVM, where that is and sort of what's going on there? Obviously, you have a ton of capacity, but
You know, I would have to check in with some folks in CEDO about
Okay.
that. It's been several years since we did the majority of the work around the neighborhood study, and some of the folks in one of the divisions at CEDO were helping to monitor some of the action items that came out of that. So I can check in with them and give you an update on that at a future meeting.
Okay, that'd be great. Seems like a natural thing to make sure that's up to speed as we enable all this other housing.
Anyone else?
Did the ordinance did the ordinance committee meet last week?
Yeah,
Yeah, we did meet last week. Emily, do you want to pipe in? Or-
sure. It was an exciting meeting, and we talked about screening on the top of buildings. And we spent a lot of time talking about the existing rules around screening, why you have screening, what street does it matter that you can see the equipment from, you know, issues like just because you can't see it from the street doesn't mean you can't see it from the top of the hill, or as more buildings become taller, other buildings being able to see the equipment on top. And we had a great architect join the meeting who lives Jay Way, who lives in a adjacent building, like a building that is going to be able to see the top of the new building on Pine Street. He had some very reasonable feedback. And basically, we circled back around to doing nothing and thought that the existing language was sufficient, and that I think the outcome from the DRB was okay, and that we didn't need to be more prescriptive in creating the requirement, and that it seems to be doing its job. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's accurate. If anything, we might come up with some, I'll say, internal guidelines as to a little bit more detail on what adequate screening is, in addition to what's in the code.
So Emily and Scott, should the developer, builder of a project, you know, like know what that code is before they get sticker shock from the materials cost of the screening, which probably is up 30% over 2019?
Well, you know, I think I talked to some architects, a couple of architects about this, and said, you know, what's going on that this developer is having an issue with screening? Because it seems to me like you should know that the screening's there. And some feedback that I received was that sometimes when a bid comes in for a building, and I'm not saying this is what happened in this building, but sometimes, you know, a bid comes back to build a building for the pricing, and they don't include mechanical screening on the top because they kind of forget that that's required, and they don't include it in the bid. And then it's a surprise at the end when they go forward and realize that they need it. And so it can be sticker shock to get the, you know, the amount at the end not included. So sometimes it's not just the developer, but maybe the design team and
Sure.
who's not aware of the requirement, or leaves it out of the pricing, maybe because it's easier to, you know, it's not included in the envelope of the building, or it's considered not totally necessary.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else?
One maybe quick follow-on question to what we were talking about at the beginning of the meeting today. Do you would it just be helpful for me to send you a calendar invite for all of your meetings for the whole year? Or one of the things that it's helpful for me about is for you to remember to change your availability status. So if you think that that will cause you to forget to do that, I may not, but if it would be helpful to send them for you for the whole year, and you'll remember to let me know if you have any challenges to your availability, I'm willing to do that.
Can we let you know our availability by denying
Declining.
calendar invite? Yeah, that's how I use it. Is I put it on my calendar, and then I'm reviewing my calendar going forward, and I see, oh, I have a conflict, and I click on it and say I'm not available for this.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
All right, thanks. We'll move on to item 8, which is minutes and communications. Is there a motion to approve the minutes and accept communications?
We have an awful lot of communications.
You
We
do.
did.
I still propose to accept them.
Okay.
I was hoping Alex would give a cliff notes of all of them.
Presentation of them? Yeah.
Yeah,
every
and a
last one of
description of
them?
the bioswale or whatever, the retention basin.
I mean, if they're about UVM buildings that aren't on Trinity Campus, do we need to talk about them in depth?
Yeah, and these are this is kind of amazing to just think about. Like, this is what the state level permitting that they do for all these projects entails. So all of those communications, as far as I understood it, were all related to the same project. It was just different state agencies permitting.
Wow.
All right. So we have a motion by Alex. Is there a second? Seconded by Michael. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, say aye or raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have our minutes and communications. Item 9 is adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn? Motion by Emily, seconded by Alex. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Stand adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Megan.
Thank
See
you.
you at our next meeting.